my name is Lon Safko, co-author of the Social Media Bible, published by John Wiley & Sons, the most comprehensive book ever written on the subject of social media. And today we are here with Pete Cashmore, CEO of Mashable, and we're going to be speaking about Mashable, social networks, and all things social media. And also one of the things that's cool is we are coming live from Scotland. How cool is that? So Pete, it's awesome that you're here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is great. Scotland. How cool is that? All the way the other side of the earth.
It's very cool. It's cold, actually. I'm sitting here with a heater and not going outside because it is freezing cold and it's dark already.
Brr.
Mid-afternoon, it's pitch black, so it is very cool.
That is cool. So let's get started. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, and why you're doing it?
Sure thing. So I'm the founder and CEO of Mashable.com. Mashable is one of the leading social media blogs. We cover social networks, social media sites like Twitter and Facebook and MySpace and Dig and YouTube. And we essentially provide the latest news on those services. We review new companies that are launching in that space. We give our opinions on those, and we also provide resource lists of, say, if you're a band, what are the top 20 sites you should be using to promote your band? So we kind of, three pieces. We do resource lists of the best companies in a space. We do opinion on what's happening in the kind of the social networking space. And we also do straight reviews of new social media, social networking sites.
Well, that just opens it up to about like a ton of questions. That is a lot of different content. Just to kind of get into perspective first, who's your typical demographic? Who is the kind of people that will come in and take value away from Mashable?
Sure. Well, I mean, we have a number of kind of different user types on the site. We have visitors who are looking for information on their competitors. There'll be companies, or they're thinking of launching a company, and they're looking for information about the market and what their competitors might be doing. So that kind of developer/executive kind of role. We also have just general web users, people who are passionate about the space. So people who are on, for instance, these social media sites already, people who use Facebook, people who use Twitter. So there's that demographic as well, where they just want to use new services and find, interesting new sites to try out. There's also, to some degree, the kind of the investor group, where people who are looking to get invested in new companies are looking for what's the hot new thing, what's happening, what are the trends to look out for, and also, obviously, to spot something new before it goes big. So I guess that would be the basic demographics. There's also, to some extent, bloggers and journalists and essentially anyone who's following this whole social networking, social media trend.
And when I looked at Mashable, I mean, I've been watching you guys for quite a while now. It's the thing that I love about this, about your website is that you're just, first of all, you're primarily news, which is great because you're getting all the latest content, all the newest stuff that's happening in the social media atmosphere. And you have such an incredibly wide range of news. I mean, don't you have like 15 different categories just of news alone?
Yeah, that's right. We do. I mean, we covered social media, which is fairly broad anyway. We started off being social networking news, but what happened over the span that we were around, which was around 3 years so far, is that social networking essentially became the web, and social networking became ingrained as a feature in virtually every website. It became something that was expected rather than something that was remarkable and unusual. So as a result, obviously our coverage has broadened a little bit. If it's social, we cover it, and a lot of stuff on the web these days is social.
Yeah, it's a huge array, and the thing that I like about it is you have it categorized so easily, so whatever a person's specific interest is, you can go and just see news about that particular subject. Or you also have another section in your website where you can actually see news based on the major social media companies like Yahoo and MySpace and Twitter. Is that correct?
Right, yeah. I mean, right now you can access that via the most popular drop-down. You can dig into certain companies that you might be interested in so that you don't have to read the full span every single day. We break it down, and we're increasingly trying to do that because obviously you might only be interested in one particular niche.
Yeah, and I like the idea that when you use that pull-down menu, that you can pull up, let's say Google, and all of the latest news right there is available. And there's a lot of really useful things in there, like tools and tips and techniques and downloads and plugins. So it seems to be just beyond really just news, but kind of helpful tips and even plugins and things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, our basis is always add value. You know, what's the value of this story or this article? You know, what can you take from it? And we always try to add value in every piece. Even when we cover news, we don't cover it in a straight way. We cover it in a way that's also, okay, what does this mean for the market? What does this mean for you if you're a developer? What does this mean for you if you're a web user? So even the news items, we try and have some value add. And obviously there's a lot of value add in things like, so I'm looking at the front page and we have, a list of tools for family travel. So we also build these lists which are, by their format, incredibly useful, where you say, what are the top sites in this category, in this particular niche? So even news and lists, and of course we do how-to posts as well. All of these are really about building value, and we're always focused on what's the value add beyond just straight news.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about the articles that you do have in there is that you have hyperlinks to other resources based on that subject, other types of lists, other kinds of tools and techniques and downloads. And so, yeah, you simply can't get that from most social media websites.
Right, and I think it's kind of a weakness of the blog format that we're trying to increasingly overcome, is that we have this huge archive of content that's incredibly useful, and how do we let people know that exists and that it's available to them? Because a lot of the time with blogs, you see the first 10 posts on the front page, and you don't realize that this blog might have 15,000 posts, and of which hundreds of them might be on this topic. We also try and direct people to what's useful from our archives and what's kind of an interesting resource on that topic.
Yeah, and that's good about the pull-down menus, because you're absolutely right. You go to a social media website, and all you're really seeing is the chronological order of the blogs. But in order to find really what you're looking for, or what your level of interest is nearly impossible. So I think the way you have it organized, I think, is excellent.
Yeah, and we also go beyond the blog format to some degree, and we have a jobs section, and we also have a beta invite sharing section where some of these new sites go into private beta, which is to say you can't get access unless you've been invited by someone who's already in. Mm-hmm. So we have this beta invite section, and you'll see that under network on the site, where you can exchange invites for new sites, where you can say, I have an invite for this site, does anyone else have? And it's kind of a sharing thing where, if you go and share invites with someone else, you're more likely to get an invite to a site that you want access to. And there's, we've gone a little bit beyond the blog format. We have, a number of features. We obviously do events, which, for instance, in summer of 2008, we did a U.S. tour where we went to 7 cities and had events for the tech community. I mean, that's a whole other part of the business, and that's an interesting part, and it's certainly grown for us this year. So we certainly go beyond simply writing content, creating content, and we're more about community. We're more about, can we offer job listings? Can we offer this exchange of beta invites? And can we bring these communities together in real life with Mashable's events?
Yeah, I like that. I noticed the events in there as well. I visit that often. Now, are these just Mashable events, or can other large social media events post in there?
Sure. So we host our own events, and these are typically, during the summer of 2008, like I say, we did 7 city tours, and we did evening networking events. We have various MASH bashes, and other, event types that we host ourselves, but we also list events from others, and people can write to us, and we will add them to our event listing. So we're now calling it the Mashable Tech Events Guide, and we're doing it weekly.
Wow.
And essentially, if you're organizing a tech event, you can write to us and seek inclusion in that if it's an interesting event that our audience might like to hear about.
Wow.
So that's really what the event section is about. We absolutely do promote other people's events, and more so than our own, obviously, because there are many, many more events than just ours.
See, and again, that's a great resource, a kind of a one-stop shop. Go to Mashable and get all things social media, and you have such a wide array of topics. Also, you'd mentioned job postings, and I saw that in there. That's a pretty useful tool for people in social media. How do you find out about those?
Well, especially right now. So jobs are on the Jobs tab of Mashable, and anyone can post a job for $100 for 30 days. And right now, in the current economic climate, that's obviously something that's an essential resource for anyone in the industry. You know, if you do, unfortunately, happen to get laid off, there are good resources for that, and Mashable Jobs is one of those.
Yeah, that's a really good resource. I saw you had quite a bit of information in there. And then that begs the next question. When I interviewed Jack Herrick, who does a WikiHow, I mean, you're looking at 30, 40,000 articles. That's a lot of content. You have a tremendous amount of really good content. Where does all that come from? So
we have a core team of writers, and they've been writing for about 3 years, so obviously we have a huge archive of posts. I don't actually know the number right now, but it will be, I think, somewhere in that range. It's definitely in the over 10,000, I think, possibly around 20,000 articles. And we have this core team of writers who put out news every day, who put out resources every day. We also have guest writers who join us, and occasionally will give some expertise on a certain topic. So, we might not have the expertise to cover, say, a PR topic, but we have someone who's an expert in that field who can write with expertise and add value. So it's a combination of our core team and guest authors who can come on board. And essentially anyone can write to us and say they're interested and this is their expertise area, and we'll determine if we think that would be interesting to our audience.
Excellent. And boy, that's a lot of work too. I mean, not only creating the articles yourself, but even just working with other writers and vetting those articles to make sure that they're appropriate for your site. That's a lot of man hours.
Absolutely. And obviously dealing with each person is very different. So, when you have a core team of writers, you know what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. Whereas when you start bringing in guests, it adds some complexities where you have to learn that all over again, and with each person, obviously, they're different, they have different strengths, they have different weaknesses, and but our editors are very, very good at dealing with that.
That's great. Wow. You'd mentioned that you're probably running close to 20,000 articles. Is there any other statistics that you can talk about Mashable? I mean, how you grow over the last 36 months?
Sure. Well, sure, we can talk about... Let me see. I mean, we can't really talk about revenue to any great degree, but
okay.
If you talk, say, in terms of... I'm trying to think what would be a good stat.
Number of unique visitors or repeat visitors?
Yeah, uniques was, last check, about 2.5 million per month. And it's been growing consistently pretty much over the past 3 years. We've had steady growth. Obviously, a blog is great because you keep adding new content every day, but you don't lose the old content. So essentially, you're consistently building more and more content on top of what you already have. The team's grown. I think there are around 10 of us now. I mean, some of our writers are obviously contracted and on full-time staff, but that's grown from when I founded it. Probably about 2 years ago, we brought on our first person beyond me. So I ran it for a year with just me. Then we brought on our first person beyond me in kind of 2006. I started it in 2005. And then since then up until now, we've grown about 10 of us full-time.
Wow.
And the team keeps growing and the revenues keep growing, and obviously extending beyond simply content into events has really
That's considerable growth. Congratulations. That's great.
Well, I also think what's worth mentioning when you talk about growth of blogs and growth of revenues is that when we started this and when many of the tech blogs started up, people thought that these wouldn't be able to get revenue and they wouldn't be able to convert at all. Mm-hmm. And now we're at a point where these blogs are serious industry, and to some degree there's a much narrower margin between what blogs are doing and what mainstream media is doing. We've got these multi-author blogs who hire many people, put out 10, 20, 25 articles per day. And I think the line's blurring between what a media company is and what a blog is.
Good point. That's a really good point. You're absolutely right. If you look at 10, 15, or 20 years ago, a full-blown media company would be releasing press releases and updating corporate information similar to this. But it just seems that this is just so much more effective and efficient than anything that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I think blogging is an interesting mechanism, but I do think that blogging to some degree has become a professional sport. Mm-hmm. And increasingly we're seeing things like, and I'm sure you'll be covering this in the Social Media Bible, we're seeing increasingly microblogging is taking off, and we're seeing increasingly that people are socializing through Facebook and mm-hmm. through Twitter, and blogs to some degree have, while they remain kind of personal outlets, there are many more choices for having a personal outlet, and one of those would be microblogging, and one of those would be your social networking profiles on places like Facebook and MySpace. So it's interesting that there are a few key blogs that have really risen to the top, and then beyond that there's this wide media scape which kind of is distributed and is between Twitter and Facebook and all the other various applications that are plugging into this whole social media graph.
Mm-hmm. And did I notice a social media kind of component, social networking component to Mashable as well?
Absolutely. So we have My Mashable, which is a social networking piece and allows you to simply sign up for a profile and connect with readers on Mashable.
See, you got to love that.
Yeah, it's a value add for us. It's certainly something that, as a reader, you can find valuable if you don't quite know that many people in the space. You want to know who reads Mashable, how do I connect with them. So I think it's a good value add to have. If you're the social media, social networking blog, you probably want to have a social network in there.
And that's what I like about the one-stop shop, is that you can get your news, you can get jobs, you can get events, but you can also social network through My Mashable as well. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is that you don't, because you do have your own social network, you're not really seeing the others as competition, because you can go into there's pull-down menus for MySpace and Facebook and many of the other more popular. So it seems like your approach is more complementing and not competing. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, on the social networking piece, our social network is essentially a way of aggregating information from other profiles anyway. I mean, we're far more interested in you pulling in content from, say, your Twitter feed than we are interested in you creating content specifically for your Mashable profile. So we're really just offering a service there, and in a way we're pushing people back to the social networks where their friends might belong. It's more of an aggregation feature for finding out, is this Mashable reader on any other social networks? It's really not about us generating FaceTime on our own social network.
So within your social networks, do you also have tools? Because did I hear that where you can pull in Flickr photos and you can pull in your Twitter feeds?
Yeah, that's right.
So you got all the most popular tools in there. So your network itself is a valuable tool.
Correct, and I think we have around 250,000 members on that social network. So it's kind of grown organically. We haven't even promoted it heavily on the blog. It's just been, a steady growth. So, I mean, it's done very well.
That is really, those are impressive numbers, especially for basically being around for 36 months or so.
Sure.
That's incredible. Business model, a lot of that's the question that comes up continuously because, believe it or not, a lot of social media companies, large ones, still have not figured out how to monetize. Most of them have gone to this freemium model where you get a certain level of services which are pretty robust for free, but then if you want additional services, then you pay incremental costs, and even those are very reasonable. And so you had mentioned you kind of grew this team, so you obviously have overhead to cover. So do you make it through sponsorships, through banner advertising? How do you generate revenue?
Right, so the way most blogs work is that they rely on sponsorship, and they either have an ad partner who reaches out to very large companies and sells across all the large blogs, or they sell direct, which is to say they have their own sales team who reach out to these companies and sell sidebar advertising and banner advertising. We do both. We have our own direct sales team that sells ads on the site. We also have an ad partner, and between them they do, very, very well for us, and we're able to obviously hire all these people without having taken funding, without any investment at all. Really, it's all bootstrapped.
And of course, that's impressive because if you look at some of the companies that are in this field right now, you're looking at sometimes as much as 10, 15, even $20 million in startup funding.
Right, that's true. And I think there's a case to be made for it. It really depends on where your business is at the time. We're certainly not considering taking funding. I think that's a great move because if you're able to bootstrap it and you can sustain continued growth, there's no reason to lose equity or control. That's a great idea. Do you use do you do your own banner advertising? Do you use something like AdSense? We do use AdSense to some degree, but we also sell on a CPM basis. So AdSense is essentially used as remnant, as fallback, but it's not our core income. I think AdSense is very difficult to monetize a blog to any great degree. It's good when you're starting out, and obviously we recommend it when you're starting out blogging, but to get a full-time wage income or enough income to support multiple writers is doubtful with AdSense, I would say. You really need to go into these specialized niche advertisers and start selling banners or sponsorship slots.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of business, most people think that social networking and the whole social media genre really is just for teenagers. But more and more, the Fortune 500, Fortune 2000 companies are starting to realize that this genre really is about business. It's communicating with your customers. Do you have any businesses or any people's stories that you could mention about businesses actually coming to Mashable, what they use it for, how they participate?
Businesses coming to Mashable and getting interested in social media and social networking. Where do you start? I think there's definitely, coming back to the demographic piece, for starters, it's certainly not the case that only teenagers are using social networking and social media. It's become broader, and it's become broader because of the way that social networking has become a core feature of the web, which is to say, I'm sure if you study the demographics of Facebook that they're trending a little older. If you study the demographics of something like a Twitter, you'll see that, okay, there's this tech crowd, but there's also kind of a mom, female demographic. There's a lot of PR people. There's actually a huge range of people on these social networks beyond teenagers. I think it began as a teen phenomenon, as new trends often do, on MySpace. But then it kind of widened a little bit, and as the older demographic became involved, I think it's really the entire web is a social network to some degree, and it's certainly not the case that there is little hubs anymore of teenagers networking. To answer the question regarding companies that are getting into social networking, I'm trying to think of some specifics. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the stories we cover with companies trying to get into social networking is that they're not doing so well at it. I remember one of our biggest stories was maybe a year ago, might even be longer, was when Walmart tried to launch a social network, and it was really not a good idea at all. I think what is interesting in terms of companies getting involved is that we're seeing these social networking tools move into the enterprise. And we're seeing tools like, for instance, microblogging becoming Yammer. And Yammer is this internal tool that companies use to communicate in kind of short messaging between all their staff. And that's becoming very popular. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're seeing is a lot of these social networks and social media tools actually going into the enterprise and being used in a way that maybe isn't the same social public communication tool, but it's more of a private intranet type service.
True. Yeah, and the thing about Walmart, that was kind of funny. You got to give them credit for being one of the first ones out there and giving it a try. And like all new technologies, enterprise is always going to get involved in it. And I think all of us are really still trying to figure out what social media is, how do you best use it, how do you best communicate with your customers. And I think some of the companies are getting it. I mean, you hear companies like Dell, for example, when the exploding batteries were taking place, and one of the top vice presidents opened up a Twitter account and gave everybody up to the minute, hour by hour updates of what to do. That was I thought a great application of microblogging and social media. And then if you look at some of the more successful blogs, such as Southwest Airlines with 500,000 unique visitors every 30 days, and JW Marriott, I think we're all still kind of trying to figure it out. And one of the things that you mentioned, it is true, is that when MySpace, I got to interview Angela Corton, Senior Vice President for MySpace, when it first came out, it was 14-year-old teenagers. But the average demographic now is actually skewing at about 34 years old. And more than a third of all of the members are between 34 and 55 years old. So, I agree. I think as social media kind of grows, we're going to learn more and more how to use it for business purposes. And I think a lot of people, like Walmart, we're going to make mistakes along the way.
Sure, and I think a lot of the stuff we cover is essentially how do you utilize these tools. I mean, we talk about creating pages on Facebook and building a network there. I think the key is, and it comes back to this Walmart question, it comes back to many of the attempts early on, perhaps a year ago, were companies trying to set up their own social networks and thinking, I can build a social network around my brand. Whereas I think we're increasingly realizing that, no, you go where the communities already are. You can set up a Facebook page, you can start a Twitter feed, you can plug into these existing communities, essentially, rather than having to do it all yourself, and which is a really high-risk proposition. And, if the audience is already built into these existing social networks, then you might as well build into those. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I heard time and time through these interviews, especially from Robert Scoble and Chris Ewer, is that their advice is, as an enterprise, is to go first to listen. Find where the people are talking about your type of products, services, or what you have interest in, and listen. And then when you understand what the conversation is, then the second most important thing is to begin participating. But don't try to create your own network and rule, because that kind of defies the logic of trusted network.
Absolutely, it's a question of listening to your customer rather than trying to speak down to them, and rather than trying to get them onto your patch, your land. You essentially go where they are already. I'm sure Robert would have spoken about things like Friend Feed, where there were a lot of conversations breaking out about companies. Obviously, Twitter, there were a lot of conversations happening. And there are many, many, many tools where you can enter your company name and essentially track what the buzz is. And when someone complains about your company on those services, they're almost surprised when they get a response directly from the company. And I've seen many, many companies I'm following on, for instance, Twitter, places like Starbucks, where they'll actually respond when you talk about them. So that's kind of very rewarding as a customer, and it can it can mend a lot of issues. You know, you'll put out a complaint and you get a response directly from the company, and you're, suddenly quite enamored with that company.
And that's true. I mean, that's human nature. 10 years ago, before social media really took foothold, if you wanted to communicate with a company, there really was no way to do it. It was a faceless organization. And the exciting thing about social media is, a lot of companies are participating, and to get a response, especially at a higher level, too. I mean, a lot of the people that are participating are on the executive level, the vice president level. And if I send something out to the blogosphere and I get a relatively immediate response, I am very impressed, and that shows to me that that company cares. And just the fact that they're participating is impressive to me. And
the challenge, of course, will be scaling that. Right now, tools like friend feed are relatively small. I think something like Twitter is likely to break out into the mainstream over the next year or so. And then what happens? What happens when, for instance, I think Barack Obama has, I have no idea how many followers, over 100,000, is it something like 130,000 at this point?
Yeah.
If your brand suddenly has hundreds of thousands of people trying to talk directly to you, then you hit the same scaling issue that big companies always hit, that they have too many customers, essentially, to talk to them all directly as human beings. So we may, unfortunately, be in a kind of a honeymoon phase here with social media, where the community is small enough that they have the ability to respond directly to absolutely every inquiry. It'll be interesting to see what happens as these companies scale up, and suddenly every Facebook page for a company has hundreds of thousands of members. Every Twitter feed for big companies has hundreds of thousands of subscribers. Suddenly that's a scaling issue, and suddenly you might hit the same issues that big companies always hit with customer service, which is there are too many customers to serve them individually.
That's a great observation, and I totally agree. What would happen to Barack Obama if all 260 million U.S. residents Twittered him at the same time? Talk about the fail whale.
And I don't think there's any easy solution, unfortunately. I think that's always been the nature of customer service, that at a point you get so many customers that you almost have to treat them as a demographic rather than as individuals, and this is where the pain point in all of consumer society comes from, but you no longer have a personal relationship with that brand.
That's true. And the exciting thing about social media is I'm sure once we reach that point, somebody's going to figure out another social media tool to kind of help supplement that.
I hope so. I really do.
I'm optimistic. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners about Mashable? You got anything coming down the road? You got any kind of news, reasons to use it? Get the heck out there and sign up, take a look at it.
We're hush-hush on what we're launching next year, though we do have a lot of stuff in the pipeline. What I would do is two things. Check out, if you use an RSS reader, grab our RSS feed, and then you'll get constant updates. And also you can go to our Twitter feed, which is at twitter.com/Mashable, and we constantly update with headlines and news that's, perhaps related to social networking and social media, but doesn't make it to the blog. So twitter.com/Mashable is a really good place to go if you want headlines on your Twitter feed from Mashable.
That's a really good tip. And if you just want to go to Mashable, your URL is?
Mashable.com, Mashable.
That's easy enough to remember. That's awesome. Cool. Well, I'd really like to thank Pete Cashmore, the CEO of Mashable, for being with us here today, live from Scotland, and talking about Mashable and social media. So, Pete, really, honestly, thank you.
No problem at all, and best of luck with the Social Media Bible. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you, sir. This is great. This has been Lon Safko, the co-author of the Social Media Bible. Please be sure to check out our other valuable social media tactics, tools, and strategies that can be found in the Social Media Bible book and its companion website, www.thesocialmediabible.com. And for more information about me, Lon Safko, please, by all means, head over to my webpage at www.lonsafko.com. And Pete, again, truly, thank you for coming to us live from Scotland.
Thanks, Lon. Good to talk to you.